Welcome to the Talking Shop podcast, where I'm here to share stories, lessons, and experiences in sports performance and professional development. My name is Matt Tomitz, and I'm super excited to take you through episode 64, all about why and how to start a podcast. Just sharing my experiences with the Talking Shop podcast. I'm excited to get back to a solo. I haven't recorded one of these in a few episodes now, and I'm excited about the amount of interest that I've received about a podcast on this topic. So let's get into it. Simple answer right off the bat, just do it. If you've thought about starting a podcast for a while, for a little bit, you're already in that stage of just consuming content, trying to figure out how to actually go about doing it, then I would 100% recommend you to do it. It is undoubtedly going to make you a better professional in the future. You're literally practicing for later in life and things you will have to do as a professional, which I will get into later in this podcast. But if I to sum it all up on why you should podcast is the limitation between getting what's in your head and your heart into others' heads and hearts is how well you can communicate. And podcasting is literally just practicing being a better communicator. So first, right off the bat, just want to put that out there. But what qualifies me in talking about how and why to start a podcast? Well, I founded, if that's what we want to call it, I'm the host of the Talking Shop podcast since July 2019, almost 1 year. I'm 63 episodes in. This will be 64. I have over 2,600 listens. I've had 34 interviews and 29 solos. So I've done a little bit of everything. I've done this almost for a year, and I think I have more experience than the average bear in this specific topic. So as I said earlier, public speaking, podcasting is literally just public speaking. It's recorded public speaking. And one thing that I never really understood is why everyone hates public speaking. Now, I don't know if it's just because I knew that it was very important, starting in Communication 100 public speaking that everyone took in college, that I tricked myself into telling myself that I liked it, but I just knew that it was important. And if that's what you have to do to get into public speaking, to do it to the best of your ability, to practice, to prepare, to look forward to it, so then when you're actually doing it, you're excited to do it, then it's worked for me. Because we all know that public speaking is important, that it's coming, and that it has to be done. You, as a student, professional, coach, someone in sports performance, so why don't we embrace that? And that's where podcasting comes into place, because it's literally just recording your public speaking with no ramifications. It's all on your own, but just the fact that it's recorded and it's somewhat structured is awesome practice. And for those that have been listeners of TSP for pretty much since the beginning, I have said, quote unquote, words are hard numerous times. And the joke that I always say when people ask me about my podcast is that sounding coherent for long periods of time is actually really hard. Think about how often just one thought in a conversation goes on. Maybe a few sentences, and then it goes to the other person, and then maybe a sentence or two, and then there's just this back and forth. But sounding coherent, like I said, for these long periods of time in a public speaking sort of format is difficult. But it's an awesome, risk-free way to practice, and I 100% think it'll pay off in the long run. So the journey of just TSP, I guess. So it all started 6 years ago, junior year of my undergrad. I started a blog called Simple Sports Performance. Sports Performance Made Simple. I don't know. It was a basic name. I didn't want to get anything too fancy, but I knew that content creation was important. It was a thing, just the growing of social media and everything along those lines, that why not start? You got to start somewhere. It's a skill. I'll do it for a little bit of time. It'll keep me busy. And then I forgot how podcasting specifically came to be. But moral of the story is I've had this idea of getting my thoughts out kind of as a professional in this format in a few different ways. And that's led me to here. So for the past, that would be 4 years, I've done some sort of professional content creation, trying to flush out my thoughts and things along those lines. And then I decided to start the Talking Shop podcast. And I use the term productive hobby. That's what Simple Sports Performance was way back when. And that's what podcasting is. It's something that will keep me busy, but it's not necessarily predicated on my direct work as a professional or my direct work as a student, but it's not completely mindless. I'm not one to sit and just play video games for hours and hours and hours, but if I do a podcast, it's a little bit more beneficial. I'm not hating on video games. I've just never been into it, but it's somewhat professional. It's skill development. It's a hobby, but it's more than just kind of something that's mindless. And just productive hobby is I think a pretty solid phrase in describing it. And it's a skill, like I said, whether it's the actual formatting of the podcast and putting it all together, if you like kind of the tech back end, or the actual podcast itself. All of it is a skill that you develop literally every episode, and you will continue to develop for however long you decide to do your podcast. So I just like learning new things, and it definitely fit the bill in being a skill and a productive hobby. And I started with this thing in mind of my favorite part about the field, me being in private strength and conditioning, private sports performance, and then now into applied sports science in college, pro sports, research, everything along those lines, was whenever I would get done with my day at the facility coaching, 7, 8 o'clock at night, me and my coworker are just getting a lift in, and we get sidetracked for like 30 minutes just talking about programming, our clients, this, just everything else under the sun relative to the field. And it hit me like that is my favorite part, is just everyone loving this field and everything about it and just talking about it. And I was like, how can I share that with everyone else? How can I perpetuate it for my own enjoyment, but also the opportunity to share with others? Because I know a lot of other people are in the field and enjoy this stuff too. And I came up with this slogan, tagline, whatever you want to call it, sharing stories, lessons, and experiences from sports performance and professional development. And the thing with that underneath is that it's everything you won't learn in a textbook. I don't understand, or I guess there's a big disconnect, in my opinion, between what we say is good coaching and what makes coaches good, and what we actually put out there for content consumption by others. We talk about these kind of soft skills, being adaptable, being able to have emotional intelligence and really get to know your athletes, buy in, and those soft skills, like I said. But everyone just wants to keep putting out on social media, content wise, what's the new programming model? What's the new way to cue a back squat? How many more things can we put bands and chains on it? And I was like, something is definitely not right here. That there's what we say makes people good and successful in this field, but then what are we trying to promote, perpetuate, enhance about this field with our content creation for subsequent content consumption by others? So that's what I really wanted to get at with this podcast. Why do I do it? It's for myself as a productive hobby, and it's my opportunity to share what I love most about this field, and I get to share it with others in what I personally think is a gap and that others can find value in. So that's why I podcast. How do I podcast? I ask interesting questions to interesting people relative to this theme of sports performance and professional development. Because I haven't only had people on my podcast in sports performance, I've had a variety of people, and I've always tied it into how can this benefit professionals in sports performance, but just interesting questions to interesting people, stuff you're not going to find in a textbook. And one thing I also say about my podcast is these are conversations that I have on my podcast that you can have every day with your colleague, boss, coworkers, fellow students, whatever it may be. I just happen to record mine. If only I could have recorded all of the awesome conversations I've had with awesome people before I started my podcast. Coulda, woulda, shoulda. But these are questions and conversations I ask and I have with people that you have similar in your own life. I just happen to record them. So that's how I do it, is I ask interesting questions to interesting people. And what is my podcast? And the what is going to change the most over time, so I wouldn't get too caught up in it. And I'm going to give examples after this slide, but the what of your podcast can be the questions you ask, your logos, how you format different sections of your episodes. I recently got into sharing my podcasts on YouTube as well, or audiograms, something more specific to social media. So the questions I ask. So this is the Word document that I send my guests before I have them on, not for them to script out their entire responses to every question, but just so they have bullet points prepared. So it's not completely random. So it's not just all these thoughts kind of somewhat being pieced together, and hopefully it comes together at the end. But so there can be some fluency in their answers. And looking back at these questions, man, a little too vague or broad or cliche, in my opinion. And I think this is version 4 on the left. Version 5 is on the right. But was that 2, 4, 5? 5 questions plus a speed round. And then it kind of hit me. The speed round is cool. It's quick, so it doesn't really matter too much, but kind of just not very valuable questions besides the one call to action. But then I shifted into more storytelling and experiences. So instead of asking, what's the main governing belief that helps guide you in your profession? Well, why don't they tell a story? It's more relatable about how the most fundamental story to where they are now, and then they can say what it taught them. So I thought it would just be more valuable, more intriguing, and entertaining for the listener. It's very concise, just 3 stories and then actionable things, because all of this stuff is fine and dandy in theory, but if this doesn't help us become better professionals in how we actually do our jobs, then what's the point, in my personal opinion? I think people do a lot of talking, but definitely undervalue how important it is to actually just go and do. So that's why I really enjoy ending with the actionable things. So that's how my questions have kind of progressed throughout this past year. If we want to get into logos, man, the one on the top left, the first one, I just made that in Microsoft Word, just a bunch of circles and lines and boxes. I made a table and people talking and a barbell with some weights on it, talking shop, I guess. And then once I started getting on YouTube, I wanted to make it obvious that that was also a resource for them, but just the different platforms that it was on. But then that was kind of weird, because if they're already listening to the podcast, they already have a platform to listen to it on. But hindsight's always 2020. I don't know. And then I wanted to make something that just looked a little bit more professional. So truth be told, I made this on Microsoft PowerPoint. I made the slide a square. You can change the dimensions. Just found a cool looking font, put black around it so it popped a little bit more. Found a photo of a weight room, turned the opacity down, made that the background, and then put my slogan at the bottom. I think that looks a ton better. Super satisfied with how it turned out. And then on YouTube, once all of this coronavirus stuff started, and I discovered Zoom and the awesome stuff that you can do with it. And that's how I'm recording this one right now. And there's just an example of the thumbnail for an episode. If you haven't watched or listened to episode 63, everything about developing and having a personal philosophy with Kyle Voigt 2.0, who's the sports scientist for USC. I think you'll enjoy it a lot. But just kind of the progression of more things, more platforms for my podcast they were on, trying to look more professional, and kind of just the flow of it. And then you have audiograms. So audiograms is a little snippet of a podcast episode. And it started out just with the title of the episode. I don't even think I had the title of the episode in the first however many I did. But you have the title of the episode and then the logo in the first one. And then I had one where I actually had a picture with the person that I interviewed on the podcast. So just to make it a little bit more personal. And then I got just a picture of that person with the logo plus a title. And these are all like 1-minute audio clips of the podcast itself. And now with my episodes coming from Zoom, I do a 1 minute of the actual video of the podcast itself. Well, I do over a minute on Instagram, so it saves to IGTV, so it's just a little bit more organized. And also, it's just, you can see them speaking. It's a little bit more personal, and that's how the audiograms have progressed throughout the years. And then, what else have I not? Formatting for episodes, I think I have like intro and outro, 5 different versions of just me changing the phrases of you just drag and drop of the same things you say about your podcast, your logo, what you're trying to get out of it, and then your outro where they can find you. I've had episodes where I haven't included those, where I've changed the drafts of it and things along those lines. And YouTube, that just came with Zoom and getting a consistent way to share the videos for it. So there's kind of the questions I ask, my logos, formatting for episodes, YouTube, and audiograms, how that has progressed. And that's the what. And like I said, that's going to change the most. So I wouldn't get too caught up in that in the beginning. What people won't tell you about podcasting, and this is, I'm excited for this slide because you intentionally want your stuff to be cringy later. And this is just with the theme of skill development, like I said earlier, where even just looking back at my logo, it's just like, oh, that was so bad. Like, why did I ever think that looked good? I definitely could have came up with something better more than 10 months, 11 months into it. But knowing that it's a skill development, it's a process, it's going to change and flow over time, kind of as you learn more, as your what changes, as I said earlier in the previous slides, that'll change the most. But if you have this in mind where I'm going to look back because I'm going to be reflecting and learning, but I'm going to cringe, but that's going to be okay. And I think I would almost be more concerned if my stuff, or if I didn't think my stuff sucked a year ago when I first started. If I look back and I was like, dang, I'm doing the same exact thing, and that's pretty cool, pretty satisfied with that. One thing I like asking myself, not to get too much on a tangent, but it's like, what if I did have everything I wanted? And what if my stuff was amazing from the beginning and I was making this podcast and I was like, yeah, I have the same format, same questions, same logos I did a year ago, totally satisfied with that. Pretty cool. I don't think that would be very satisfying or very entertaining for kind of the journey and just the skill development. So that's that. You intentionally want your stuff to be cringy later. And this next bullet point is kind of funny. I was chatting with the TCU beach volleyball athletic trainer, because that's the team that I worked with, and we were talking about my podcast. And I said, I'm not doing it for the listens, but I care about how many people listen to it. And the athletic trainer just said, so you do care about the listens? And I was like, dang it, you're right. Yes, I am doing it for the listens. And I think that this is important because it's funny, the more professionals I talk with in the field, everyone has thought about creating content at some point in time, whether it's a podcast, whether it's YouTube videos, whether it's a paid online course, whatever it may be. And if I'm not making this podcast just for me to listen to. Do I want this to blow up and, become the biggest podcast ever, Joe Rogan 2.0? I mean, I think that would be pretty cool. But over the last year, I finished my master's. I've been on the job search and everything along those lines. So it's like, how much can I really put into it? So yes, I am doing it for listens. And I do want my podcast to grow over time, as things just kind of progress. I wouldn't always want the same 5 people listening to every episode. I'm doing it for myself, but also to share these awesome stories, lessons, and experiences with other people. So that does matter, but it's not the end all be all. But also, listens are a form of feedback. If you start out with 20 listens on your first episode and then it gets lower and lower every time, well, maybe you're not giving the audience what they want. And is that the only thing that matters? No, because you're also doing it partly for yourself. But knowing that the listens do matter, I was under the impression that, no, I wasn't doing this for the listens. And then I literally followed that sentence up with, but I care how many listens it gets. So that's something just to acknowledge, not even embrace, just acknowledge that is a part of it. And that you do want others to get something out of it as well, not just yourself. What podcasting has done for me, I've become so much better at public speaking, not only because I reflect a lot and I intentionally want to get better at public speaking, and I tell myself, I think I'm into it, but even if I'm just telling myself that I have to be into it, over the past year, I've 100% got better. It's an opportunity to connect with old friends and make new ones. When I first started my podcast, I made a list. I went through my phone contacts of someone that I knew well enough to have their phone number, of people that I think at some point in time just knowing a little bit about their experiences could potentially provide something of value in this context of my podcast and the aim of it. I had like 40 to 50 people. It's like how cool is that? Like I said, these are questions and conversations I ask and have every day. I just happen to record it. And how many people that I've connected with, whether it's just, at that one point in time, or I've continued staying in contact with since. And also, people that I've reached out to that I hadn't known before. I just like their content, or I think that they would have something of value to offer, and ask them to be on my podcast. Jordan Lives Fitness, I don't remember the episodes numbers specifically, but he's been on 2 podcasts. He followed me, he slid in my DMs, asked just about my podcasting experience. I think he recently just started his own, so that's pretty cool. But I followed him for a few weeks. I liked his content a lot, and I asked him to be on. And I'm excited to say that I would consider him my friend, and we've had some awesome chats, both on and off air. But an opportunity to connect with old friends and make new ones. And I put the Talking Shop podcast on my resume. It only takes up one line, but it's the Talking Shop podcast, founder/host, parentheses 2,600 plus listens, and then starting July 2019. And I had an interview with the Chicago Cubs, and the guy asked about it. It's like, oh, I've been thinking about doing it. So a few of my buddies have, and I just wanted to hear what you thought about it. And then that opened up a whole conversation. So it shows that, and this is an unintentional, I guess, benefit, or side benefit, is that it shows that you're ambitious and kind of proactive and wanting to start and try new things. And it's an opportunity just to show a little bit about who you are. And I love this field, and I love the things that you're not going to learn in a textbook. And what an awesome way, an awesome platform I have to record and share it with other people. So that's just a side benefit. And recently, Samson Equipment, one of the top main outfitters of weight rooms for pro and college teams, their head social media person came across one of my episodes, listened to it, and slid my DMs and said, hey, with all this coronavirus stuff, we are starting our own podcast called the Strength Coach Collective. You can hold a conversation. You're professional. Could you tell me a little bit more? This was on the phone. Could you tell me a little bit more about your podcast? I'll tell you about our kind of game plan about the Strength Coach Collective, and we'd love to have you host a few episodes if it all lines up. And we chatted for 10-15 minutes. It was, we were both on the same page about what he wanted to get out of his podcast and how I could help him, and kind of just how I interpreted his podcast. And it was, and he said, it's an opportunity for you to get your name out there and open up our network to you. And I've hosted 2 podcasts now, one currently out, episode 9 with Riley Allen, Ole Miss men's basketball. That was super cool. At the end of our chat, he said, oh, I'd love to stay in touch. I really enjoyed our chat. I want to help you out however I can. So there's one person. I just interviewed someone that hasn't been released yet, but a strength coach at San Jose State University. Super nice guy. He wants to stay in contact as well. And that's something that I could have never possibly dreamed, of some equipment company wanting me to host podcasts for them. But, I'd done, let's say 50 up to that point in time, or 55, or whichever episode he listened to, and how much better I got along the way to, at that point in time, I was good enough to where he thought that I could effectively host his podcast. And a point before I forget, well, 2 points. So with this whole Samson thing, I'm super excited about it. I know that it's just hosting a few episodes. And has it led to anything yet? No, but could it? Who knows? There's only one way to find out, and it's just by going and doing, just the theme of all of this. But with all this coronavirus stuff, me graduating with my master's from Texas Christian University, go Frogs, getting into this field of sports performance, whether I want to go college or pro sports science or consult for a sports science tech company, I've recently started networking and having these phone calls with all of these awesome professionals at these Power 5 schools, pro teams, these big name tech companies, and things along those lines. And the skills that I've developed in being able to research them, come up with questions before, as well as actually being on the phone. Do you know how hard it is to be professional with a stranger in the first minute of just exchanging a few emails back and forth. It's not rocket science, but it's definitely not the easiest thing I've done. And just think about how much better these phone calls have gotten because I know how to speak coherently for somewhat long periods of time. And I know how to create questions before and also know how to create questions on the fly, just whether it's in my podcast, just going on tangents with my guest, or in these keeping a stimulating conversation going with whoever I'm networking with in a professional context. And looking back, I've gotten a few compliments from these people that I've been networking with, and not cliche network, like actually going, doing, calling these people, them asking for my resume just to keep in the back of their head for their buddies if they ask, and like legit networking, not cliche networking. Getting multiple compliments on just the questions I ask and my ability to hold a conversation, and things that you would think are really basic, but it's taken me 63 episodes to get to that point where they would feel needed, feel the need to give me that compliment because they've just enjoyed it so much. And that's not to toot my own horn, but if I didn't have my podcast, I don't know if I'd be able to network as well as I have been. And that's the end of that rant. What are you worried about in starting this podcast? And a quote that I really like is the best time to start was 20 years ago. The second best time is now. And there's a I forgot what podcast episode it was, but I said, if it takes me 273 episodes to get that one huge person or that episode that kind of blows up or whatever it may be, well, do you know how many episodes I have to get through to get to 273? 272 episodes. And looking back, I'm so glad that I started my podcast because I've done this for a whole year. And if I was starting now, I'd be like, oh man, like where's the time gone? I have so much I want to do. And it's just like, man, if I just did it. So the best time to start, obviously, is probably when you first had these thoughts of starting a podcast for yourself. And the second best time is doing it right now. And for those who are part of the Gary V Army, Gary Vaynerchuk, and all of the various medias of platforms of social media he's on, there's a video of his, was it a mid 20-something-year-old, kind of like myself, and they asked, oh, well, Gary, what if I do all this stuff and it doesn't pan out, or I just end up wasting my time? And Gary just goes, your time isn't worth anything. What else are you going to do with your time? And this brings up another important point where, yes, I was doing my master's throughout this whole process, but I knew I could make time. And I don't think anyone is truly busy 24/7. From the minute they wake up to the minute they go to bed, they had no break in between on a week, 7 days a week besides their sleep. Now, if you are, no disrespect or anything, I just think that people have a little bit more time if they really make time. Like, I believe that people can make time for what they want. And in all of the time that I've spent on my podcast, whether it's editing after, whether it's posting, whether it's trying to keep my social media up to date, whether it's doing the actual podcast itself, contacting people, everything that has accompanied this journey, what else would I have done? I don't really know, and I'm very glad that I've taken the choice, I guess unintentionally back then, but to fill up my time with something that's a productive hobby. And I think it's only going to help. And especially if I would assume most of my audience is young-ish, let's say you make it through 20 episodes and you're like, yeah, not really for me, not really getting too much out of it. It's been fun. I can see what Matt's talking about, but not really mine, not really for me. Cool. There's one more thing that you don't have to worry about anymore because you've been there, done that, and you know that it's not for you. And let's say it is. Have a hobby that you can do forever. It's an opportunity to become a better professional, connect with old friends, make new friends. So I think it's only going to help whether it pans out or it doesn't. And one other thing that people might be worried about is starting small. If we're acknowledging that the listens do matter, I think it's great starting small because you can literally make it whatever you want it to be because there's no pressure to maintain this audience following the listens if you had this, huge amount of them. And I'm not saying my podcast is huge by any means. I don't know, let's say I average like 30 listens per episode. I don't like to think of my stuff as clickbaity. I don't put my stuff in all caps. I don't advertise it as this one secret or the one tip or whatever it may be. But, as I have somewhat of a consistent audience and following, it's in the back of my mind, is this going to be received well? Is this valuable to other people besides myself? Like I said, I'm not making a podcast. You aren't thinking about / potentially making a podcast for just you to consume it because you made it. So why would you consume it? But so I think starting great is awesome to work out some of the kinks, and just reflecting back, what if I had done all of my 34 interviews on Zoom and YouTube instead of just the most recent, was there 8 or 10 of them? Well, what if I had to get those first 24 out of the way to make those current 10 that much better? And hindsight's always 2020. You can't go back and change the past. So I would just embrace it for what it is and just go and do. So that's me at attempting to address what's potentially been holding you back from starting your podcast. Other benefits of starting a podcast is it's an opportunity to flush out your thoughts and write them down. And that's something that I've received from multiple guests that I've interviewed on TSP, is that they enjoy the questions because we can get so caught up, especially in sports performance, when it seems like there's an endless amount of things to do and stay busy with, is that people don't often take the time to sit down, reflect on where they've been and what they believe in now and where they want to go. And my current questions of the coolest story you have, the story most fundamental that's brought you to now, and the story you're most proud of. How many times have you personally been asked that? How many times have you asked that to other people? So I'm trying to make it a little bit unique with those questions, also just relatable, but also get at things that are important. Reflecting on how awesome this field is with the coolest story, reflecting on a pivotal moment that you might not have realized has been super fundamental to where you are now, and as well as something just with the proudest story of, yeah, I did that, and I'm excited to share that with you guys. So that's my thought process behind my questions, and as well as with my 2.0 episodes where it's more predicated on a specific topic relative to that person, where it's just writing down their whole thought process and kind of how they do things and what they believe on that one certain topic. And especially for my own solos, some that have been more predicated on a specific experience or a specific facet of sports science, but being able to make something engaging but logical, valuable about a certain topic for beyond 10, 15 minutes is a fun challenge. And I think that it would challenge a lot of you guys, the listeners, whether it's reflecting on your own journey, but also what do you believe in, and getting it on pen and paper in front of you. And it's an opportunity to network, to connect with old friends and also new people. And with networking being this mutual exchange of value, people can value things in different ways, but it justifies potentially reaching out to people that you wouldn't reach out to. It's, hey, I have this podcast. I think you'd be an awesome guest. This is the theme. I've been following you for however long now, and I'd love to have you on. It's a benefit for you because you're getting this, person potentially in your network and on your podcast, but for them, it's an opportunity for them to potentially reach more people that they wouldn't have otherwise, and also a piece of content that they can use as their own to help promote themselves and whatever they're doing. So going along back to the connecting with old friends and making new friends. So action steps. First, figure out your why, your how, and your what in that order, inspired by Kyle Voigt. Thank you, episode 63. My why is because I love this part about the field, and I think that there's a big disconnect between what we say is good coaching and what we promote out there content-wise. How do I do it? I ask interesting questions to interesting people, and I just happen to record them. And then what I do, I've taken you kind of along the journey of all of that in just the questions I ask, the logos, things along those lines. So once you get the why and the how in line, because I can't give you specific things for those two because that's going to be super personal to you. But for the what, you need a hosting platform. I use Anchor. I remember using Anchor before it kind of blew up, and it's like, man, if I started as a podcast 5 years ago, how cool would that have been? Where would it be now? But second best moment is now. A hosting platform. Do your research. There's a lot out there. Are you going to do just audio? Are you going to do video and audio? Zoom is pretty good. I haven't messed around with Skype, but I know Skype does similar type stuff. Are you going to put it on YouTube? What platforms of social media are you going to put it on? Are you going to make audiograms? Things along those lines. What equipment are you going to use? I found success in just using my computer, my phone, my Apple white headphone mic, and I haven't spent money on anything else really. And I know people that spend thousands of dollars on their equipment. Figuring out what's in line for your podcast. The next thing I would say is make a list of the topics and people that you want to talk about for at least 10 episodes. First one, just being an intro about yourself, what you want to get out of the podcast. Okay, 9 episodes of people if you want it to all be interviews, or topics if you want them to all be solos, or a mixture of both. But as things will become more clear as you make it through your podcasting journey, it's tough to come up with stuff right then and there. The worst is when I had the time and motivation to do an episode, but I didn't know what to do it about. But I've always had a list, and that's been super beneficial in just giving yourself some direction. And like I said, writing all this stuff out, you'll see what makes sense, what doesn't, and kind of fine tune it before you actually start doing it yourself. So action steps. If you followed along this whole time and I've convinced you or just enlightened you on why you should start a podcast, why do you want to start a podcast? How are you going to do it? And then how are you actually going to achieve it through the what? Make a storyboard, a list of your first 10 episodes, not necessarily in a specific order, but just 10 different topics / interviews. And then just go do it. Words are hard. Embrace the suck. It's a productive hobby. It's a chance for you to become better as a professional. Get all of your bad episodes out of the way now so you can become that much better of a podcast host, that much better of a public speaker for when it's going to matter in the future, because all you have is now, so take care of it. The last thing I would want for you is to get that one big interview or that one big phone call, whatever it may be, and you missing out on all of that potential skill development because you just decided not to start your podcast. I hope that made a lot of sense. I'm very excited to share this episode with you guys because I think that podcasting has done so much more than I could have possibly ever imagined when little overambitious Matt, that's what I call him, came out to play almost a year ago, 11 months ago. And I'm so glad that I did it. And I think that you 100% should do it. If you have any questions, I'd love to help you out figuring out your why, how, and what. I'd love to listen to your episodes. I love just to feedback on how it's gone for you, if I can help you out in any way, shape, or form. So thank you very much.